Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, AIOps Ops 2021, the state of AIOps. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Valerie O'Connell, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. Valerie came to EMA with decades of senior level experience in the effective marketing of technology. She excels at making the value proposition of complex products clear in crowded markets and at equipping sales forces to strike with precision. And before I hand things over to Valerie, I wanted the audience to know that today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand playback. So I hope you will go ahead and check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Valerie O'Connell. Valerie?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining us. And while I'm handing out the thank yous, let me start with thanking our research sponsors. This is independent research, but for those of you who aren't familiar with EMA, we get sponsors for our research in much the same way that TV shows get advertisers. These sponsors invest in our research, and they do so very bravely before they have any idea what the results are going to be. Theoretically, it could be not in their favor. However, in the case of these four, Broadcom, Cloud Fabrics, IBM, and Resolve, thank you guys, thank you all of you, you make it possible. They're all leaders in the AIOps field, and anything good that could be said about AIOps will certainly accrue to them, as different as their solutions are. The basis of, or the genesis of this research that I'm going to be sharing with you today is actually started a year ago, where EMA did what we call an AIOps radar. That's an in-depth look at what vendors are offering, how they're being used by their client base, what their use cases are, it's use case based, and what their roadmaps are. 40 some odd page questionnaire, followed by hours of interviews, and interviewing at least 2 of their live implementations. So we have a very good idea of what's out there in terms of the vendor landscape, and there are so many AIOps platforms and solutions out there, many of them just outstanding in their own ways. But we wanted to know, all right, how are people actually using these solutions out in the wild? And you could say, well, Valerie, you spoke to 30 some odd implementations in depth. Yes, but those were handpicked by the vendors. So we wanted to know what's going on. Hence, AIOps 2021. Some of the top findings, and many of them we'll dive into, but I think one of the immediate takeaways is that the vendor AIOps capabilities as they exist today exceed what's commonly in place, the common enterprise demands. The actual deployments and the overall use currently lag well behind the potential of the existing platforms. And the existing platforms that you see today are roadmapped to do really interesting, aggressive opportunities. So AIOps is still very early as an IT initiative. 61% of the people in this survey initiative, their AIOps implementations are 2 years or less. AIOps and automation, though they're technically separate topics, are inextricably linked, and both are largely driven by digital transformation and by the C-suite. And directly behind the C-suite is, not surprisingly, IT ops. We asked people to rate themselves and the success of their AIOps implementations. 100% of those who self-reported as being very successful and extremely successful use an AIOps platform. And the top performers are consolidating to one. And we'll go into some of these things later, but not much later, because this is only scheduled for a half an hour. In any kind of research, there are always some surprises along the line, and this one was no exception. But probably for me, the biggest surprise was not that AIOps is largely successful, but how very successful it is. So let's start there. Here's the question that I had already mentioned. we asked overall, how successful do you feel your organization has been with its AIOps investment to the left? I mean, to date. And the chart on the left shows the overall responses. 31% said that they were extremely successful. 46% said very successful. And 19% said successful. Now, we had more discouraging answers available, like not successful or miserable, whatever they were, but nobody answered those. The lowest rating was marginally successful at 4%. So 100% of the respondents were successful with AIOps, and 77% reported being very and extremely successful. So how successful? How are you rating this? Well, take a look. We asked relative to cost. So this comes close to being an ROI kind of question. It's not like, is everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya? It's how would you characterize the value AIOps brings to your organization relative to cost? And you see here that if break even is kind of average, that 41% said high and 21% said very high. So I think it's fair to conclude that an AIOps initiative at whatever level of ambition is going to at least break even. 16% said they were too early to tell, and that speaks to the immaturity of the implementations themselves. And of those who thought it was early, it still looked good. One of the things I always like to check in the research is we spend a lot of time speaking with vendors, but how are people talking about these capabilities out in the field? So we asked early on in the surveys, how does your organization refer to AI analytics and machine learning assisted automation? And sure enough, 30% call it AIOps, but some call it by domain name, by department name, by use case, by the action being taken. And I wanted to know early on in the survey, before the questions start predisposing people to, oh, that's the answer. What does the term AIOps mean to you? Please select the answer that is closest to your understanding. 35% gave what I would call a purist answer, the use of AI or machine learning in IT operations. And that's technically correct. But you'll see here that the next two answers are the use of automation in IT operations and the use of AI or ML plus automated actions. So more than half of the respondents directly associate automation with AIOps. And that makes sense because what is the sense of being able to have highly distinctive knowing if you're not going to do anything with it? And if you are going to do something based on this knowing, doesn't it make sense to automate it? And the answer for most people is yes, it does. More than half of the respondents said that automation is a C-suite initiative and it's strategic across the organization. By way of contrast, AIOps rang in with a 32% strategic rating. So automation is very important. Here's another way of looking at it. We asked, how would you characterize the priority of automation in your organization today? And over on the left, you see high priority, departmental, advancing. And the bars represent how they characterize the priority of AIOps: strategic, part of the transformation process, response to complexity, and tactical. So you see on the top, the blue bar, the big blue bar across high priority, shows that those who prioritize automation and AIOps at the highest level tend to be related. Let's see. This little pause is me figuring out how to advance to the next slide and not to the next 20. We asked, what is the current state of automation in your organization or enterprise? When it comes to tasks and processes we have automated, fill in the blank. Almost 19% said most with as little human intervention as possible. 41% said most with human oversight. Then we get into the same questions with many with little human intervention, many with human oversight. So that's good. But then the next natural question is, all right, that's where you are today. Where do you want to be? So we asked, what is the long-term goal for automation in your organization? And here I had another surprise. I thought everybody would be driving, well, not everybody, but lots of people would be driving towards the autonomous enterprise. Eliminate the need for human intervention wherever possible. Da, da, da. But in fact, 48.5% said that their long-term goal is automate as much as possible, but retain a human touch. Then I realized that I shouldn't have been that surprised, because all of the research that EMA has done and our interactions in the field show that people don't natively trust automation, and especially when it's driven by something they don't necessarily understand. At the end of the day, for all the things that people say about people tend to trust the human oversight and touch. I do expect that as time goes on and experience with automation and AI goes on, that the long-term goal will become more towards the autonomous actions wherever possible. And that's where the savings are. So let's look at what automations are being supported by AIOps implementations today. I'm not going to go through all of these. And anytime you see a chart like this, don't panic. I'm not going to read them to you. You'll get a playback of this, this presentation, and you can look at these things at your leisure. But you'll see that workflows, runbook, alert-driven notifications, and restarts of applications, systems, and/or services top the list. And I'd just like to say a word about automations that may not be extreme, like restarts. That's not exactly the stuff that science fiction is made of, but it's really useful. And when there are tactical implementations as well, that doesn't mean they're not important. It just means they're not enterprise-wide. Now, I have in this chart listed the people who answered that they were extremely successful with their implementations, but all the groups had the same kinds of automations. Just the high-performing ones selected more automations and at a higher rate. We like to say that automation breeds automation. As an organization has experience with automation, the cultural ability to consume it also grows. So automation increases with implementation experience. The top use cases, you notice that the Internet of Things and operational technology leads the list. One of the things that's interesting, for at least the past 5 years, if you give across practice areas, if you give people a choice of as many things as possible, IoT is always on the list, but it has rarely been in the top 3. That has changed. IoT and operational technology lead the pack. So those are the top use cases: business impact, observability, and event management. In terms of adjacent stakeholders, the list could have been much longer. AIOps touches all portions of the organization. One of the things that I noted was that DevOps and AIOps have probably the strongest organizational interaction throughout this survey. And ITSM certainly is strong, but DevOps is this, and development is the strongest immediate connection. Observability. Now, not everybody agrees with what observability means, but everybody wants it. When I asked observability, which statement about observability best characterizes your organization, you see that everybody's interested. It's either an area of high interest or a capability that people are actively pursuing. A couple people did say that it was just a new word for monitoring, but in general, everybody wants it. I asked a question that would be easy to answer if you had observability in place. How long would it take your team to answer the following type of question? And the question is, what was the relationship between my service and name an infrastructure element at a specific point in time? How long would that take? Seconds, minutes, hours, days? We don't have that capability. The fact that 57% answered in minutes and Another almost 20% answered in hours shows that observability is not far entrenched in most enterprises at this point, because you would be able to answer that in seconds, one would think. I have here, interestingly, companies that have a strong SRE function tended to answer this question worse. So instead of seconds, they would say minutes. Instead of minutes, they would say hours, and so on. And I think that's because they have a more informed view of what it is they don't know. We asked, which of the following capabilities are most important in your AIOps implementation? And observability, end-to-end visibility heads the list, followed by a 5-way tie, hyperautomation, ability to take automated actions, support for legacy, private, and public cloud, business outcomes, and real-time accuracy of CMDB. They all speak to automation by implication. So the analytical capabilities that are most important are increasingly paired with automated actions as well. And then they're all trending in the direction of predictive and prescriptive analytics, although not a whole lot of people are actually making maximum use of the predictive, prescriptive, automated connection. Machine learning tops the list, followed by optimization, topology and analytics, predictive algorithms, comparators, and observability. We asked, how are digital transformation initiatives and AIOps related in your organization? They are strongly related. Digital transformation is driving the AIOps strategy in almost 40% of the cases. The two are tightly coupled in another 27%. Digital transformation is one of those words that people are a little sick of hearing about because it's been around for a while, but it is universal and it's not going anywhere. People say, and it's true, that digital transformation is not a destination, it's a journey. So let's take a quick swing through some of the characteristics and results of the highly successful AIOps implementations, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to take a close look at people who are just marginally successful. How would you characterize the priority of AIOps in your organization? AIOps is, now the navy blue bar are those who answered that it's extremely successful AIOps. The purple is very successful and the yellow is successful. And you'll see here that there's a close correlation between extreme success in AIOps and the fact that it's strategic. And that makes sense because when something is strategic, it has executive sponsorship, the funding that is usually required to make headway in an organization. And we had already mentioned digital transformation. 65% of those who were extremely successful responded that digital transformation drives their organization's AIOps strategy, compared to only 15% of the successful group. So I think that's due to a combination of factors, including the executive sponsorship and the budget. What are the top drivers of AIOps? Operational efficiencies, CIO priority, efficient workflows, digital transformation, and DevSecOps. The top drivers tend to be positive. I mentioned here even visionary. They speak of improvements through innovation. And as I said, automation is a big part of it. Less successful groups tend to major in the immediate and the tactical rather than the strategic. And I've bolded here that digital transformation is a notable exception because all groups rank it as a top driver. You'll notice that this chart on the left is, again, responses of those who were extremely successful. And you'll see that cost is not on the list. It didn't make the cut. It came in at 9% as a top driver for extremely successful groups versus 32% of those who were successful. So what do people measure? I'm not going to go through all of these, but reduced number of outages, business outcomes, decrease in war room frequency, cost savings. You'll say, wait a minute, Valerie, you just said that cost isn't a main driver. No, it's not a driver, but it's a very nice result that almost everybody recognizes. And if it can be measured, it will be measured. I say here that there's no shortage of challenges to AIOps. What are or were the primary challenges to AIOps initiatives in your organization? The blue line are the extremely successful group, and the purple line, that's the successful group. Cost of technologies is up there. Data accuracy and accessibility, that's an ongoing problem for everybody. New, old, successful, wildly successful, data is an issue. And notice I have an arrow here for conflicts within IT. Look how close the extremely successful and successful group are. It's just a little side excursion. In every research that EMA has done since I've been here, conflict within IT, not with other departments, is always in the top 5 of challenges, usually in the top 3. And here, AIOps is no exception. So let's take a look at the pain-gain ratio. Let's take a look at the pain. We asked, how straightforward or complex was your implementation? You notice that very few people said that it was smooth or relatively easy. On the other hand, about it's the same amount thought it was very difficult. So we're approaching a normal curve. The fact is that most people find it challenging, maybe even very challenging, or straightforward but not easy. AIOps is not a simple proposition. It's not one size fits all. And it's not anybody who thinks it's easy either hasn't done much or is in a very high level of management that's being lied to. It's not easy, but then we get to the gain. Now, these two charts are very similar. The top one asks, how would you rate the effectiveness and efficiency of your IT operations effort? And then the bottom one says, how would you rate the resultant quality of service that's delivered by IT? Again, let's take a look at the blue line. That's the extremely successful group. And the extremely successful group rates the effectiveness and efficiency of their IT operations as outstanding at a much, much higher level of consistency and outstandingness, if that's a word, than any other group. And the same is true of the quality of the IT service. Benefits, IT benefits. Look, DevOps effectiveness is at the top. As I said, I was marginally surprised and then not surprised when I thought about it, that the interrelationship between DevOps and AIOps, how strong it is, how integrated it is, and obviously cloud operations too. Those are top benefits and drivers as well. Increasingly, I mentioned here that SRE and security ops connection is growing. So stay tuned for that one. The business benefits related as an overall result of AIOps, everybody, large, small, cross-industry, wildly successful, marginally successful, have improved IT business alignment. And part of the reason is because there's a better quality of IT and business service. When you're doing that, you also have improved end user and customer experience. Business process efficiencies follow as well. We asked people, what organizational or process changes does AIOps tend to foster? I already mentioned IT business alignment improves. Of course it does. When service is better and people are working together and collaborating, IT business alignment improves. It's almost impossible not to improve if you're doing a good AIOps implementation. DevOps runs faster and more efficiently, and there's a better employee experience and more visibility into it, as well as cross-functional teams and collaboration. We're coming down the home stretch here, but I may run a minute or two, but I have really planned for this to be a half an hour. So now we're going to take a look at AIOps platforms, uses, and considerations. Let me just say that using an AIOps platform, and there are lots of different flavors of them and lots of ways to be excellent, but you need an AIOps platform. It's essential. And platform consolidation is increasingly a factor as well. So on the left here, we have a chart. Does your organization use an AIOps platform? Pretty much the answer is yes. The navy blue line, again, is the extremely successful group. Not only do they use one, they use only one. So the extremely successful group is leaning in the direction of platform consolidation. I have a little sidebar here on the right asking, is there currently any effort to consolidate or reduce the number of tool sets? 61% said yes, 24% said no, 15% answered no, but there should be. And while platforms don't get rid of the need to consolidate tool sets, it certainly works in that direction just by their very nature. I say here that the platform market is active, and I say that because asked is a new replacement AIOps solution under consideration. For all but 20%, the answer was yes. And the most successful are looking sooner, faster. So the blue line on top, yes, they're looking in the coming year. That's 75% of the extremely successful group. So if you're extremely successful, why are you looking for a new platform? And here I'm switching my point of view to the maturity of the AIOps implementation. The blue line in this case are AIOps implementations that are more than 2 years old, and the purple line being those who are 1 to 2 years. So the blue line are the mature AIOps implementations. And here's why they're more interesting. First of all, they're more likely to be extremely successful because experience, unless you're really, really just not very, very swift, you get better with time. You make some mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, you move on, you accelerate your growth. And after 2+ years, people have the experience, they've received value, they know what AIOps can do for them, and they're also now bumping into their limitations. So the most successful and the most mature are looking for, in their AIOps platforms, flexibility, advanced AI and analytics, and scalability. Cost is in there as well. But flexibility, AI, and scalability are the main ones. If you're new in the market looking for a platform, just a little word here, it makes sense. Take a cue from the people who have led the way and look for those things yourself. So when it comes to buying, is there a budget set aside for AIOps? Yes, there is. And the most successful have it as a separate budget line item in operations, although plenty of them have it in shared budget. So budget and success go together. No surprise there. That's been true from time immemorial. One small surprise for me was I asked a proof of concept question, almost as a throwaway, because one of the sponsors had prompted me to. And I was surprised, not that 35% took 7 to 12 months, but that 30% at all different kinds of success rates took longer than 1 year. So proof of concept, people say, oh, it's free. No, it's not. Anything that's taking that kind of time is an expensive venture to begin with. So who drives the investments? Executives and IT ops. For both AI ops and automation, an interesting point on who drives the investment. When it comes to automation, the executive level of involvement not only goes up, but we saw a huge jump in CFOs playing a part there. 13% responded that CFOs drive automation, and they were pretty much a non-presence in AI ops. Coming up on my last slide here, we asked, what is the impact of AI ops on the relationship between IT and the rest of the business? Over here on the left are the generalized answer. If a modest impact could be seen as average, you see that I gave people 3 very good above average answers: meaningful, significant, and transformational. And 21% of the people chose the superlative transformational. And you could have just said it was significant. Transformational is a pretty big word. Looking at the same information, the same question, but breaking it down by the success groups, The extremely successful group chose the superlative transformational at a rate of almost 50%. So the impact of AIOps on the relationship between IT and the business is going to, at the very least, be good, very good, or outstandingly good. Which brings me to my last slide. In conclusion, AIOps is real. It's not just a marketing buzzword. People are doing real things with it, but it's still early. I have here that it's the near and clear future of IT ops. I think the phrase AIOps is going to go away. Why? Because AIOps, AI and automation are such a natural pairing, and they're just a no-brainer for IT operations. I think they're just going to get subsumed. People are just going to assume it in IT ops. And I have here the AI ops is paved by aggressive vendor roadmaps. For the moment, pretty much anything you want to do with a combination of AI and AI ops and automation, there's some vendor out there who can help you get it done. So that's what I have to say. I came in pretty close to a half an hour, yay me. If you have any questions, shoot me an email like I have here. I'm easy to find, and I'd be very interested to know what you're interested in. That's me. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to the sponsors. Have a nice day, everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. You will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback. So I hope you will check that email out, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.